Tantor Audio, a division of Recorded Books, presents The Fainting Room, a novel, by Sarah Pemberton Strong, narrated by Khristine Hvam. Chapter 1. It was just after midnight, and the last guests had gone home. Ray Shepard sat at his desk in the upstairs study, fingers pressed against his forehead. There was a dull throbbing there, a headache brought on by the combination of too much wine at the party and his wife's bizarre exit afterwards. He took off his glasses and massaged the bridge of his nose. One window was open, and through it came the sound of the spring peepers. Were they always this noisy? The sound was painfully high, sharp almost. Ray rubbed his forehead, and this was what he knew. 1 minute he was sitting at his desk, wincing at the decibel level of frogs, and the next second he was... where? His eyes were closed. He opened them, saw that his head was pressed against the knees of his khakis. His arms gripped his shins. The plane crash position, he thought, and realized there had been some sort of crash. His ears were full of a terrible splintering sound that had just ended. He lifted his head a few inches. Across the room, the window had been smashed. The picture window, his beautiful, curved 1864 Queen Anne picture window. Long shards of glass lay on the floor directly beneath the sill. Smaller pieces had flown farther. There was glass on the desk in front of him, glass on his papers, and one large shard that jutted out from the well of typewriter keys like a small transparent iceberg. His Tiffany desk lamp had flown halfway across the room and landed on the rug. Its pearly glass shade now hung from the bronze armature in pieces, and beside the smashed lamp lay a smooth gray rock the size of his fist. The rock looked familiar, though he could not think why. He shook his head and stood up, then had to hold onto the desk while his vision darkened, cleared again. Something was tickling his cheek. He brushed his face and his palm became warm and sticky. The sight of so much blood on his hand sent a surge of adrenaline through him that cleared his mind. Was whoever threw the rock going to break in? He stuck his head out the window and listened. A car. Was that Evelyn changing her mind and coming back? Or was it someone leaving? He went across the hall to the bedroom and looked out the window. The driveway was empty. Wherever his wife was, it was not here. She, at least, was safe. Ray went downstairs and switched on the backyard floodlights. Lit up, the lawn furniture looked slightly unreal, as if it were part of a movie set. The rock, he realized, had come from the border of his herb garden. In the bright lights, he could see the exact spot it had been. The gap in the border looked like a smile with one tooth knocked out. A soft breeze moved the tiny new leaves of the maple, but nothing else stirred. Whoever had thrown the rock had run or driven away, and he was alone. A drop of blood splashed on his shoes. He checked his face in the bathroom mirror. There was a lot of blood, a wet, coagulated mess that began at his hairline, along his temple just where he was going gray, and then dripped down over his cheek. He washed the blood off, looked again. The cut was long and clean. A piece of flying glass must have done it, not the rock. He wrung out a washcloth and held it to his head and sat on the lip of the bathtub for a while. He was cold, and his heart was thumping so hard in his chest it was painful. It occurred to him that he should do something more than just sitting here waiting for Evelyn to return. So he called the police. 2 officers who arrived on his doorstep seemed to have been chosen for a visual sight gag of comedic opposites. One was young, short, with dark hair and the build of a middleweight boxer. He came into the house with the eagerness of a young dog straining on a leash. The other officer was tall and weary, with thinning gray hair and watery blue eyes. He entered slowly, and once in the study surveyed the room with an indifferent expression that made Ray think of a museum guard. Broken window, broken lamp, glass all over the Persian rug. The rock on the floor near the bookcase. Ray repeated what he'd already said on the phone, that he had no idea who'd done it. There was a party here earlier, but the last guest had left 20 minutes before it happened, and his wife had gone out perhaps 5 minutes after that. The young one bounced slightly on his toes as if preparing to throw a punch. "Your wife went out at this time of night?" His accent was straight out of Southie, many generations of Boston distilled into his broad nasal vowels. "Where'd she go?" Ray paused. "She wanted milk, and we were all out." "She goes for milk at 1 a.m? "She's a night owl, and she likes the Star Market that's open 24 hours. Ray hoped that would be enough. He couldn't explain Evelyn's behavior even to himself, and there was no way he could explain it to these cops. "Got any enemies?" the young one asked. This made Ray think of a detective story he'd once written in college. He'd used the exact same phrase. "Or anyone at the party you argued with?" "No, they're all friends from my firm. From work." "You're a lawyer?" "I'm an architect with no enemies." In his collegiate detective story, the shooting victim had had plenty of enemies. A blonde spy, a sinister fellow businessman, a corrupt police chief. "Anyone you owe money to?" Dumb dialogue, Ray thought, and wondered if he were in shock. "No," he said aloud. "Nothing like that." The older officer wrote something down in his notebook, then looked at Ray and spoke for the first time since introducing himself. "Some townies causing trouble, most likely. Maybe the Newell Academy kids. Just last week, a couple of them rode Impeach Reagan outside the front steps of City Hall over in Newell Center." He smiled, a faint, tired smile. "Your tax dollars pay to wash it off again, right?" He glanced at the washcloth Ray still held to his forehead. "The blood's seeping through. Why don't you let us take you over to St. Mary's? It's always better to have a head wound checked." "It was a shard of glass that cut me, not the rock," Ray said. "I don't have a concussion. Besides, my wife will be home soon. She'll look after me." The young one was already halfway to the door. "We'll cruise around the area," he said. "See if we can pick up any punks." "We won't find anyone," said the tired officer, more to the ceiling than to his partner, or Ray. "The kids are probably back in the woods by now." He sighed and added, "Springtime of the year. There's always kids in the woods." At the door he held out his hand and Ray shook it. "This kind of thing happens sometimes," he said. "Even in Randall. Sorry it happened to you." Ray watched them drive away, then went into the kitchen and looked at the clock. It was 1:15 now, and Evelyn still wasn't back. Chapter 2. There were kids in the woods, just as the officer had said. It was the last Friday before summer vacation, and 2 parties were going on. One boarding school, one townie. The public school townies were down near the reservoir, and the Newell Academy kids were up on Swan Hill. Each party had its centerpiece, a pony keg of beer. In both cases, Budweiser, both bought by 17-year-olds with fake IDs from the same package store in Newell. By the time the police car passed, both groups had dwindled. Among the townies, most had gone home when the beer ran out. Up on Swan Hill, one couple had gone off behind the trees. A few boys were pissing over an outcropping of rock overlooking the reservoir, and 2 girls had taken their paper cups of beer and gone to lie on their backs at the top of the hill. "See," said the taller girl, the pink-haired one. She swung her arms across the grass as if she were making a snow angel. "I told you you'd feel better up here." The other girl was small with spiky black hair and black army boots. She rolled over on her side and looked at her friend. "Yeah, I feel so much better I think I'll kill myself at the end of the weekend rather than now." "Come on, Ingrid," the pink-haired girl said. "You'll figure something out. Maybe Ms. Luce will change her mind about suspending you." "Oh, don't talk about it," said Ingrid. "Let's just sit and smoke and listen to Rob Jacobs throwing up over there." She sat up and kicked the heels of her boots against the ground. They were real combat boots, bought secondhand at an Army-Navy store in Boston. She could still feel against the soles of her feet the contours of the soldier who had worn them before her. In moments such as this one, when the future looked particularly bleak, it was comforting to imagine what hells her boots had been in, perhaps even having their previous owner get killed while wearing them. She kicked her boot heels hard against the trampled grass, down into the damp June earth, and felt a tiny bit better. She had been summoned to see Ms. Luce, the dean, that afternoon. She'd expected a weekend of community service and a talking to, which she had been given so many times that it didn't hold any real unpleasantness for her. Or, she suspected, for Ms. Luce, who, unlike some teachers, never pretended she didn't like you anymore just because you screwed up. She went in without knocking, and the dean looked up from her desk, on which a manila folder labeled Slade, T. Ingrid lay closed. "There you are, Ingrid," she said. "You've changed hair colors, I see." Ingrid's hand went to her spiky head. Jessica Rosen had helped her dye it black a few days earlier. "I like it better than the purple," Ms. Luce said. "Sit down." "Your necklace is purple," Ingrid said. Ms. Luce was wearing her usual aging hippie jewelry, and today the beads around her neck looked like they were made out of painted tinker toys. Miss Luce ignored this and looked hard at the manila folder without opening it, as if she could see through the cover to the writing inside. "This is your second drinking offense this semester," she said after a moment. "You already have 15 demerits for smoking, so J-Board has suspended you for 6 weeks. "How can I be suspended for 6 weeks when there's only a few days left of school?" Ingrid asked. "Because," Ms. Luce said, with a gentleness that was lost on Ingrid, "you won't be allowed to attend summer intensive this year." Ingrid sat back as if she'd been slapped. "But summer intensive is what I'm supposed to do this summer." She leaned forward again, pressed her hands against the edge of Ms. Luce's desk so hard her knuckles cracked. "I can't go home. There's no one there." Ms. Luce's hands twirled the beads on her tinker toy necklace. "I'm sorry, Ingrid. The consequences are right there in the student handbook. You'd better call your father." "That's what I'm trying to tell you. He's not there. He left today for New Mexico. I'm sure his company has a way of getting in touch with him." Ingrid gave a disgusted snort. "His company is the Department of Defense. Go ahead, call them and see how far you get." Ms. Luce opened the file, saw that Ingrid was trying to read upside down, and closed it again. "Most parents prefer to hear about a suspension from their children," she said. "But if you really don't want to call him yourself, I'll do it." "I was drinking 1 beer, Ingrid said sulkily. "It's not like I was shooting heroin." "The point, however, is that you know the rules, and you broke them." "Can't I miss fall term instead?" "Of course not. This way you'll be able to graduate with the rest of your class next year." "You smoke in the teacher's lounge. I've seen you." "The teacher's lounge is not your dorm room, and your suspension is for drinking." The bell rang, announcing the beginning of C period. "Well, what now?" Ingrid asked. "Do I just go to class?" "You're suspended. I suggest you go back to your room and start packing." "But then what? I mean, even if you can find him, I doubt my dad's going to be able to get me a flight tonight." "Your suspension will officially start when you leave for the airport. So I can go to class then? It's physics. And Monday's the final. Ms. Luce looked at Ingrid, slumped in the wooden chair, and sighed. Physics is your best subject, isn't it? All right, go. You won't be here on Monday, you realize. But why don't you speak to Mr. Carberg and see if he'll let you take the exam early? Thanks. Ingrid stood up and started to go out, but at the door she hesitated. Ms. Luce, if you can't get my dad, I'll have to stay here, right? She pressed her lips together, and the dean realized Ingrid was trying not to cry. I mean, you wouldn't just send me home if no one's there. Don't worry, Ingrid, Ms. Luce said kindly. I'm sure I can track down your dad. I'll explain what happened, and wherever he is, we'll arrange for you to meet him. Good luck with that one, Ingrid muttered. Ignoring Ms. Luce's request to close the door after her, she started down the hall, filled it with the sound of combat boots running. Just before dinner that evening, the payphone on the second-floor hall of the girls' dorm rang 7 times and then stopped. After a moment, Natasha Byrne's voice came down the corridor. Ingrid! Ingrid, it's for you! Ingrid sat up in bed and ground out her cigarette. More bad news, mister. My stomach twisted in more knots than a little kid's shoelaces. Then my gut tripped and fell on them. Ingrid! Natasha Byrne could really yell. Ingrid Slade, goddammit, I'm leaving the phone dangling here. Ingrid got up and went down the hall. I could have stayed where I was, flat on my face, but I thought I'd roll over just for the fun of seeing what was barreling down on me before I got clobbered. Sweetie, what is this? Her father's voice was loud over some indistinct noise in the background. The school says you're suspended. How'd they get hold of you? Ingrid said. I thought you were in New Mexico making bigger and better bombs. I picked up the messages from the answering service en route, he said, ignoring the jibe. What happened, Ingrid? They caught me drinking 1 beer, which you know everybody does. And now, instead of doing summer intensive, they want to send me home for 6 weeks. I told them you wouldn't be there. I won't be. Hang on a minute. He took the phone away from his ear, and Ingrid heard the hollow crackle of an announcement being made over an intercom. Where are you? She asked. Las Vegas Airport, and my flight is boarding. We'll have to talk about this later. So what do I tell the school? Do I come to the base with you? Sweetie, there's no way I could bring you on site with me. I'm sorry, but it's all highly classified. You know that. When I get there, I'll call Linda and have her book you a flight to Irvine. You can stay with her for a month until I get back. Mister, it was worse than I'd expected. Dad, I am not staying with your girlfriend. There was a stiff silence on the other end of the line. Linda is very fond of you, her father said after a moment. And if you would just make a minimum of effort. I do make an effort. We just don't get along. And besides, my flight is boarding, Ingrid. I've got to go. Tell the school you'll stay with Linda. I love you, sweetie. Dad, please, I can't spend the summer at Linda's. It'll be totally miserable. You should have thought of that before you decided to break the rules, her father said, and Ingrid hung up on him. Now she was lying on her back on Swan Hill at 1 a.m. She was half drunk. She was lying beside Jessica Rosen, and she didn't feel any better. Not really. Maybe another cigarette would help. Ingrid sat up and fumbled in the pocket of her jacket. Here, Jessica held out her own cigarettes. Ingrid accepted an old gold and leaned in so Jessica could light it from the tip of her own. Cigarettes kissing. Ingrid liked to watch Jessica smoke. She had the long fingers of a pianist, which she was, and she had a way of unconsciously twirling the cigarette that reminded Ingrid of miniature conductor's movements, as if Jessica were smoking in accompaniment to an orchestra only she could hear. Now she watched Jessica's fingers tap ash into the damp grass, flip the cigarette back up to her mouth, inhale again. "Your fingers are still stained black from my head," Ingrid said. "I know. When I was home last weekend, my mom asked me if I was worried I'd get blood poisoning. I go, 'Mom, it's hair dye.'" Jessica coughed. "So when are they kicking you out?" "I don't know. My dad wants me to stay with his girlfriend Linda, but I haven't told Ms. Luce that. I guess if Linda calls the office tomorrow, I'm screwed. But she might not call. Linda doesn't like me any more than I like her." "But you have to go somewhere." "Too bad I can't come with you for your au pair job, huh?" "Yeah, if only you'd taken French. I could have argued for a 1-to-1 kid-nanny ratio." Jessica stubbed out her cigarette and stood up. "Where are you going?" "To get us more beer. Maybe 4 beers is the happiness number." "Don't leave me," Ingrid wanted to say. Though, of course, Jessica would be gone only a minute. But once she'd disappeared down the hill toward the keg, Ingrid had the urge to roll over into the crushed grass where Jessica had been sitting, breathe in the smoky air of her exhalations before it disappeared. Which was ridiculous. She knew perfectly well that the dispersion of air molecules is such that soon the air from Jessica's lungs would be everywhere, forever. That every time she breathed in, she was inhaling air that had been breathed by everyone who had ever lived. Einstein, for example. Hitler, Amelia Earhart, Jesus. Her mother. But it didn't feel like that. The air she breathed in felt lonely. Ingrid stopped kicking her heels and stared up at the sky. "I'm alone here, mister. 1:27 a.m. And I'm all alone." Chapter 3. "Why tonight?" Evelyn said aloud. She was sitting in the car in the Star Market parking lot, the dial on the dashboard reading a green-lit 1:30. She switched off the engine and rested her head against the steering wheel. She knew the answer, of course. Why not tonight? It had to happen sometime. That she would snap and screw up completely. And tonight was as good as any other. She'd been dreading the party since Ray first suggested it. Insisted, really. "We have to have people over. It's so far beyond our turn, it's laughable. We've been over to the Jaegers more times than I can count. And the worst of all, don't worry, Evelyn, sweetheart. I'll do everything." He'd meant to be kind, to relieve her of the dread and inadequacy these events dumped over her like a tub of ice water. Since her marriage to Ray a year ago, it had been a constant struggle to catch up. She didn't know what prosciutto was, or how to make stuffed mushrooms for 20, or choose wine or play hostess in the manner to which his friends were accustomed. And Ray's reassurances that he would handle it had the unintended effect of highlighting all her shortcomings. The morning of the party, she woke up drenched in sweat. Flop sweat, her sister would have said, as in, the performance you're about to give is going to flop. It was true. Things were going badly even before noon. First, Ray didn't take the afternoon off as promised. A mistake had been found in a set of drawings, and he'd stayed late to fix them. In his absence, Evelyn had ruined the vichyssoise by pureeing the cooked potatoes in the blender until they were the consistency of glue. No matter how much milk she added to try to fix it, the soup was like library paste. "Don't freak out," she lectured herself. "Don't even start. Just do it over. You have enough potatoes." The second batch of soup was better. Ray came home, tasted, and pronounced it perfect, unaware of its predecessor now gurgling through the sewer pipes below the toilet. Evelyn started in on the salad, while Ray went down to the basement to choose wine. She wasn't sure about the green pepper. Should it be diced or cut in circles? Well, she would do the tomato first. Anyone could do tomatoes, without even thinking. But without thinking, she brought the knife down on her thumb. Ray always kept the knives well sharpened, and the cut was deep. She knew it should probably have stitches, but by then it was 5:30 and time was running out. If she went to the emergency room, she was liable to be there for hours, and there was still too much to do. She bandaged her thumb herself, wrapping it in layers of gauze and surgical tape, and only then called Ray to come finish the salad. She just nicked her thumb, she said when he noticed, and no, it wasn't too bad. Poor baby. Ray kissed her cheek, then began kissing her neck, her hair. You're beautiful. You know that? No, I'm not. Ray put his arms around her waist. Come upstairs. She half wanted to. She was so tense it would be good to be forced to stop thinking, forced to give herself over to her body. But it was almost 6 and they were way behind schedule. I have to vacuum, she said. There's time. The smell of your skin is burning me up. You mean I smell like sweat? Then I have to shower too. He let her go, and then she wished she had given in. Instead, she vacuumed while Ray maneuvered expertly among spices and shallots, making a salad dressing so good she felt again the sting of her own inadequacy. Her cut thumb throbbed. After her shower, Evelyn sat at the dressing table and tried to relax. After all, there was no sign that anything was wrong. She could hear Ray downstairs whistling some classical thing. He couldn't be happier. So why was she so worried? She brushed her hair, checked to see if among the bright red any gray had appeared, put on foundation to hide her freckles, chose a lipstick. As always, leaning into a mirror to do her makeup reminded her of how, as a child, she'd watched others perform the transformation. She used to peek around the canvas alley to watch the men get in makeup, crouched on stools, close to the long mirrors so they could see in the bad light. Their hands flew over their faces, transforming them with daubs of grease paint from men into clowns. Evelyn considered the lipstick in her hand. If she made the line of her lips a good inch wider all the way around, she could be a clown too, and in one stroke of color return to where she had come from, down in the dirt with the clowns and the roustabouts, squinting up into the high reaches of the big top at 3 glittering blurs walking gracefully into the air. Father, mother, sister. She put the lipstick away. By 7:30, the Shepard's living room had filled with people. Evelyn tried to stay close to Ray, but guests kept sweeping him away from her. Where was he now? In crowds, Ray was unremarkable, neither tall nor loud. You might not notice him unless you met his eyes, which held a lightness of movement more suggestive of boyhood than a man approaching middle age. He looked his best in company. Alone, his habitual expression was that of someone attempting to solve a crossword puzzle. But even then, if interrupted, he would look up, more startled than annoyed at the intrusion. And he would smile. He looked up now as if he'd felt her searching for him. He was standing with his back against the carved oak mantelpiece, cornered, it appeared, by a tall woman in a brown cardigan and a necklace that looked like it was made out of blobs of clay. "Evelyn," said Ray as she came up beside them. "This is Liz Luce from Newell Academy." Newell Academy, Evelyn had been told several times, was on the National Register of Historic Places, and the dining hall Ray had designed for them had just been written up in some magazine Evelyn couldn't remember the name of, though she'd cut out the newspaper clipping and saved it. "So pleased to meet you," Liz Luce said, extending her hand. "Ray's dining hall has made all our other buildings look absolutely ramshackle by comparison." "Actually," said Ray, "your campus buildings are a wonderful example of the federal style. Take the roof lines, for example." Evelyn felt a prickle of irritation. When Ray got going on architecture, it was impossible to shut him up. Liz Luce must have felt the same way. She interrupted. "Honestly, Ray, I've been so burdened with adolescent crises this week, I don't think I could even tell you what color my own kitchen's painted. Thank God this year is almost over. She turned to Evelyn. I was on the phone with parents until 11 o'clock last night, dealing with one thing or another. And now I have a girl
Sample complete. Ready to continue?